So get ready. I almost think you might want to put on a seatbelt for this. This is going to be special. Introduced by Marc Holden, PhD's Worldwide Strategy and Planning Director, we have the only techno-philosopher speaking at this year's festival, Mr. Jason Silva. Over to you, Marc and Jason.
Thank you. So arguably, the best seminars at Cannes are those that educate and inform, that teach us something and leave us with information that we can use, that give us something of real practical value that we can apply to our businesses and our clients' businesses, perhaps even that day. This is not going to be one of those seminars. Think of this as a 50-minute break, a mental refresh, and hopefully a mental reboot, a reboot of how you see the future that we're all stepping into together. Now, I want you to try and imagine something, if you will. We are all walking backwards into the future, staring at the past. All we know is that what has passed. And that means that our present-day paradigms, i.e. how we see the world, are past tethered. Or put more simply, we see the world around us through the lens of that which has already happened, not what will happen. And that's a bit of an issue, because it means we're not always that good at spotting present-day opportunities. So take me, for example. In 2007, when I first saw Twitter, I didn't really get it straight away, because I viewed it through the past tethered paradigm of text messaging. If I'd have known at that point what a smartphone was and how ubiquitous they would be, and I could sense the power of social media, I would have taken a different view. So imagine if you, right now, had a future tethered paradigm. What would you see around you that people don't see? Think about how you would view wearable tech, for example. You may see it completely differently to everyone else. You may just be interested in a very niche part of it, because you would know that that part is the future. Now, in order to try to future tether you, we're going to try and imagine the world of tomorrow. We're not going to just share ideas and insights. We're going to try and move you, because a visceral response within you will be a sign that something lasting has changed. And that possibly is what we're all seeking from these sorts of gatherings when we get together. Now, there may be a better person on the planet right now to do this than Jason Silva, but good luck trying to find them. I mean, Jason is a very unusual human being. He's a futurist, a filmmaker, host of Nat Geo's Brain Games, and creator of incredible online movies called Shots of Awe. But I think more than that, he may just be the universe trying to tell us something. 19th century American essayist Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "The mind once stretched by a new idea never returns to its original dimensions." Jason, I hope, will leave your mind stretched forever, and hopefully reboot your intuitive sense of tomorrow. That's the high ambition of this session. So that's it. There's nothing to do. Don't even try and take notes. Just sit back, relax, and buckle up, because you're about to go on a mind trip. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Silva.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, guys. How's it going? You guys having a good day? Thank you so much for being here. It's really an honor. I'm really passionate about creativity, and you guys are all creative people, so you probably share that passion. And I'm passionate about technology because I believe that technology is how we extend our creativity out into the world. Technology is a scaffolding, according to the cognitive philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers, a scaffolding that extends our thought, our reach, and our vision. Technology is how we impregnate the world with mindedness. We take in matter of low organization, we put it through our mental filters, and we extrude space shuttles and iPhones. Now, I love this idea about technology's capacity to extend our will, to extend our agency into the world. But here's the amazing thing about technology. It evolves, it emerges at an exponential rate. Now, that is very difficult for our brains to literally wrap their heads around. Like, The fact that our brains evolved in a world that was linear and local means we can only really make predictions that have to do with linear change. 100,000 years ago, in the savannas of Africa, we had to make a linear calculation about how far away that predator was before it ran over here and ate us. We don't live in that world anymore. We now live in a world that is global and that is exponential, and that is very, very difficult and counterintuitive for us to understand. My very good friend Ray Kurzweil, who's now at Google, famed futurist and inventor, popularized the term singularity, has a wonderful example to illustrate what exponential implies. So consider his 30 steps example. If you take 30 linear steps, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, by step 30, you get to 30. That's intuitive, that's normal, that's what you expect. That is not how technology evolves. Technology evolves, again, exponentially. So you take the same amount of steps exponentially, you would go 2, 4, 8, 16. By step 30, you're at 1 billion. Just take that in for a second. You're taking the same amount of steps. 30 linear steps gets you to 30. 30 exponential steps gets you to 1 billion. That is why the smartphone in your pocket is actually 1 million times cheaper, 1 million times smaller, and 1,000 times more powerful than what used to be a $60 million supercomputer that was half a building in size 40 years ago. And you needed special privileges to gain access to it, Kurzweil reminds us. So what used to be half a building now fits in your pocket. And those exponential trends are continuing. So what currently fits in your pocket in the next 25 years is going to shrink down to the size of a blood cell, interfacing directly with your biological neurons, reverse engineering us from inside out, and amplifying our intelligence to unfathomable levels. That is what's coming, folks. It's kind of insane. I mean, that's exactly my reaction, right? So I tell people that really my thing is I'm addicted to cognitive ecstasy. I'm addicted to that moment in which you appreciate, you have an ontological awakening when you realize what's right in front of you, what was right under your nose, and you failed to notice it. So I made it my mission to try to popularize these ideas, these things that were talked about at TED conferences, or in the halls of Google or IBM or Intel. How do you explain Moore's Law? How do you explain the implications of exponential change? How do you explain to people that a young person with a smartphone in Africa today has better communications technology than the US president had 25 years ago? And what does that mean? And how does that empower us to transform the world, to subvert, to subjugate limitations? Right? Because that's what we are. That's the human story. The species that didn't stay in the caves, that hasn't stayed on the planet, and that on the back of biotechnologies won't even stay within the limitations of biology. That's us. But that requires a story and a narrative. And we need to put those ideas out into the world to really have people transcend their mental models, transcend the been theirs and done that's of the adult mind, right? And so I started doing a series of videos to do this because I think the way you really get these ideas into the world, to reset people's nervous systems, is through poetry, art, and visual imagery, media, basically. If media acts as a drug, it can be either a narcotic drug that stupefies, or it can be an entheogenic psychedelic drug that opens up your mind, gets rid of those filters, and lets you see the world as if for the first time. And that's what I want to do. I want to impregnate people with a sense of possibility, with that cognitive ecstasy, with mindgasm, which is defined as an exhilarating neurostorm of intense intellectual pleasure. So hopefully you're going to experience this today. The first video that I want to show you, because I started a series of videos called Shots of Awe, to try to give people these philosophical espresso shots in 2 minutes or less. Because again, we have so many signals competing for our attention, so much bandwidth anxiety, attention being the new limited resource that you really only have a few minutes to make your case, and then you've been pushed to the bottom of the newsfeed. So these 2-minute videos that I started to do were just that, espresso shots put out into the world to try to invigorate and reset the imagination. The first video I want to show you today is an ode to the human capacity to overcome boundaries. The human capacity to overcome boundaries. So let's roll that first video.
So there's a great line by Shakespeare in which he says, "We know what we are, we know not what we may be. And in the age of accelerating technologies in which we extend the cognitive reach of our minds, the perimeters of our humanness with these extensions of self, these exoskeletons, these technological scaffoldings, you know, the wings of our aircrafts and the signals traveling through our smartphones, sending our thoughts electrified at the speed of light across oceans of sky. We redefine and extend what it means to be human. Edward O. Wilson says, we have actually decommissioned natural selection, and now we must look deep within ourselves and decide what we wish to become. We are now the chief agents of evolution. We have reverse engineered the software of biology and are about to rewire and upgrade and redefine what it is to be a Homo sapien. Juan Enriquez uses the term Homo evolutus, the being that evolves itself, that transforms itself, right? Ray Kurzweil, we didn't stay in the caves. We haven't stayed on the planet. Biology, just another membrane to be transcended. You know, Marvin Minsky used to say, will robots inherit the earth? Yes, they will, but they will be our children. You know, I love this idea because we hear the term transhumanism, and what it means to be human is to be transhuman. We are the species that transforms and transcends. We never stopped. We always did. It's what we are.
So again, it's about having, thank you very much. It's about really touching people, right? Because reason leads to conclusions. Emotion leads to action. Someone's told me recently. And so it's about really trying to touch people, to get them to really consider things in a different manner. And so you have this capacity to overcome boundaries. We have this capacity. And then we're moving towards the future at an exponential rate. But so far, it's only been happening within information technology. You know, computers have transformed the world. Marshall McLuhan used to say the computer is the new LSD, literalizing the psychedelic dream of mind expansion. Now our cognitive scaffolding is the iPhone or the Android phone. You know, it's no longer LSD. But this notion, right, that we're moving towards this future, what does this mean? Well, it means, for once, that information technology is now swallowing everything else. So biology is now becoming an information technology. The biotech revolution, the healthcare revolution, means that now we are mastering the information processes of biology. And guess what? That's going 3 times faster than exponential. Gene sequencing is going 3 times faster than Moore's law. When Craig Venter, perhaps the father of genomics, was asked, are you worried that you're playing God? He said, who's playing? The physicist Freeman Dyson talks about a near future where a new generation of artists will be writing genomes with the fluency that Blake and Byron wrote verses. Try to imagine that. Biology becoming the new canvas for our genius, for our artistry, for our brilliance and our poetry. Biology becoming our canvas. What are we going to make? Not just cure every disease, not just reverse engineer what we are, but turn ourselves into a work of art. As Sophocles says, manifold the wonders, nothing towers more wondrous than man. And some people scream hubris, but I think possibilities. What might we make? Nanotechnology turns matter into a programmable medium by manipulating at the level of the atom. Nanotechnology also evolving at an exponential rate. These 3 overlapping revolutions, GNR, genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics AI, coalescing together in the next 35 years, according to people like Kurzweil, leading us towards a singularity. This is the term. This is a metaphor, because we're really talking about the unfathomable. It's like trying to explain Shakespeare to a monkey. You know what I mean? We haven't augmented ourselves to the point to be able to envision what becomes possible in the back of these exponentially overlapping technologies. But we can certainly use art, metaphor, and poetry to at least speculate. So let's show the next video.
So let's talk about the future of us. What does that even mean? The future of us. It's a look at what comes next. It's a look at what might be. Because today, exponentially emerging technologies are transforming what's possible. They're helping us overcome, transcend even biological limitations. The very rules of what it is to be human are up for grabs. We're rewriting the software of life with biotechnology. We're turning matter into a programmable medium with nanotechnology. We're creating sentient minds with artificial intelligence that are not bound by the limitations of biology. These three overlapping revolutions, GNR, genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics, together will be leveraged to lead us towards a black hole-like, impossible to fathom singularity. It's like staring into the sun, a moment of a rousing symphonic climax when all of mind, leveraged and networked together, transcends its biological origins and we become something more. People worry about the AIs and the them. Well, as Kurzweil says, that's going to be us. The future of us is ours to dream up.
So it's ours to dream up, right? Now here's the thing. I do get a lot of flack from people saying, aren't we tinkering with nature? Isn't this unnatural? Aren't these technologies going against the natural order? But this is where I think we need to make a cognitive shift. Kevin Kelly, the co-founder of Wired magazine, coined the term the Technium. And he describes technology as the seventh kingdom of life, subject to the same evolutionary forces as biology. In other words, technology is not natural. We live in a grand continuum, smack in the middle between the born and the made. We emerged from the biosphere. Technology emerged from us. It's all natural. It's all allowed by the laws of physics. But that requires a real transcendence of our mental models, to realize that these tools are our second skin, to realize they are our extended phenotype. They are our termite colony. They are our spider's web. They sprout from us. It's our imagination. It's the condensation of the imagination, as Terence McKenna used to say. And increasingly, we're moving into the realm of the imagination. So here's the next video. To understand is to perceive patterns, the parallels between nature and technology.
You know, there's a mind-expanding idea that smashes the false duality between nature and technology. The realization that nature and technology are one and the same, a continuum, smack in the middle between the born and the made, is summed up in the lines, to understand is to perceive patterns. That moment when the dots connect, you see the gestalt, long view, and you see the big picture. This notion of patterns. For example, Paul Stamets has written about the mycelial archetype and how the information sharing systems that comprise the internet, a man-made system, mirror the neurons in our brain, a natural system, which in turn mirror computer models of dark matter in the universe. They all share the exact same intermingled filamental structure. It's unbelievable. Or for example, the fact that forager ants, when they hunt for food, their patterns of hunting mirror the TCP/IP protocols that govern information flow of traffic on the internet. Same patterns. Jeffrey West from the Santa Fe Institute tells us that cities are actually like organisms. They have metabolic rates, and that alleys are like capillaries. Fly an airplane, look at a city from the sky. It looks like a motherboard. It looks like a microchip. Information arranged, evolution, life, sentience, mind. To understand is to perceive these patterns. There is no duality between nature and technology. It is all one and the same.
Thank you. So, given this idea that technology is us, right? Of course, it extends our capacities, and it can do so in any direction. Technology has always been a double-edged sword. From the moment we discovered fire, we realized we could cook our foods or we could burn that guy that pissed us off. That's the thing about these tools, and exponentially more powerful tools empower us to do exponentially more powerful things in positive directions or negative directions. So it's really up to the cultural narratives that we put out there. How do we reprogram our wetware, our cultural operating system, to agree on a consensus, to agree that we need to leverage these tools to address the grand challenges of humanity? So how do we encourage ourselves to probe at what Stephen Johnson refers to as the adjacent possible? This shadow future, as he describes, that hovers over the present state of things. A map, perhaps, cartography, a map of all the ways in which the present can reinvent itself, right? So when the astronauts first went to space and turned around and took a picture of the Earth from space, immediately, viscerally, we had a new story, a new perspective of who and what we are. Instantly, an ontological awakening, a forceful reckoning with what is. And I think on the back of these exponentially emergent technologies, we are in dire need of a new story. Where are we going? Who are we? What is the adjacent possible? So this next video is about that. It's about probing at the perimeters of the possible, because that is what it's all about. Let's show the next video.
I'm very inspired by the idea of the adjacent possible that Stephen Johnson wrote about in his book, Where Good Ideas Come From. And he says that the adjacent possible is like a shadow future that sort of hovers over the present state of things. The adjacent possible is like a map of all the ways in which the present can reinvent itself. I love this idea because it implies a kind of built-in optimism in how we see the world. It sort of implies a different way of looking at things that is not held back, that will not be bound by what is, but that is always remixing, that is always reinventing, that is always looking at how we can transform the material properties of the present so that we can bring into being our virtual models, our imaginative visions, because that's what human beings do. Imagination allows us to conceive of these delightful future possibilities and then literally pull the present forward to meet it. And increasingly powerful technologies are shrinking the lag time between what we can imagine and what we can create. The adjacent possible is a move that is accelerating. Our adjacent possible is increasingly being able to be instantiated in real time. We're time-lapsing our capacity to literally render our dreams into being. So for that reason, the adjacent possible rocks my imagination.
You know, thank you. There's a great line by Tom Robbins that he says, you cannot manufacture imagination or wonderment, but what you can do, hopefully, is pull people so radically out of context, pull them so radically out of context that they're forced to gawk in amazement at the ubiquitous everyday wonders that we seem to be culturally disposed to ignore. You know, I mentioned before transcending the been theirs and done that's of the adult mind and try to see the world through the eyes of a child. Try to wake up, as they say. And recently, a study came out of Stanford University on the subject of awe. I always tell people that, like, my favorite word was wonder junkie. The word wonder junkie was coined by Carl Sagan to describe the Ellie Arroway character, Jodie Foster, in the book and then movie Contact. Her existential angst, her affliction, her desire to understand. She was a cognitive ecstasy addict. She was a wonder junkie. And I think there's a wonder junkie in all of us, right? And so this Stanford study, looking at the subject of awe and wonder, defined awe in the following way. They defined awe as an experience of such perceptual expansion, such perceptual vastness, that you literally have to reconfigure your mental models of the world in order to assimilate the experience. Because you have no reference points for what you're seeing. The first time you saw the Grand Canyon, the first time you went and saw the Hubble IMAX 3D film in the theater, you literally had no maps for these territories. So you were like dumbstruck, awestruck. And as it turns out, these instances of awe leave people with residual psychological benefits. So awe is not just great in the moment, it has all sorts of therapeutic benefits. Increased feelings of creativity, increased feelings of well-being, increased feelings of compassion and altruism. It's like Timothy Leary was right. In order to use your head, you've got to go out of your mind. And I love this idea because it kind of justified what I was trying to do with these videos, which is to impregnate the world with awe, to try to make people open their eyes a little bit and feel a little bit. And why? Because at the end of the day, we are finite beings. The only thing we know for sure is we're going to be food for worms one day. We are beings that ponder the infinite, yet we're housed in these heart-pumping, breath-gasping, decaying bodies. The only response to the human conundrum, to the human condition, is the creative response. What are we going to do? What are we going to make? How are we going to make our lives matter? Transcending boundaries, I believe, is the literal and symbolic answer to the mortal coil. So I want to leave you with a video right now about transcending mental models and the power of awe. Let's roll it.
So I think a lot about the contrast between banality and wonder, between disengagement and radiant ecstasy, between being unaffected by the here and now and being absolutely ravished emotionally by it. And I think one of the problems for human beings is mental habits. Once we create a comfort zone, we rarely step outside of that comfort zone. But the consequence of that is a phenomenon known as hedonic adaptation. Overstimulation to the same kind of thing, the same stimuli again and again and again, renders said stimuli invisible. Your brain has already mapped it in its own head, and you no longer literally have to be engaged by that. We have eyes yet see not, ears that hear not, and hearts that neither feel nor understand. There's a great book called The Wondering Brain that says that one of the ways that we elicit wonder is by scrambling the self temporarily so that the world can seep in. You know, Henry Miller says even a blade of grass, when given proper attention, becomes an infinitely magnificent world in itself, you know. Darwin said attention, if sudden and close, graduates into surprise, and this into astonishment, and this into stupefied amazement. That's what rapture is. That's what illumination is. That's what that sort of infinite comprehending awe that human beings love so much. And so how do we do that? How do we mess with our perceptual apparatus in order to have the kind of emotional and aesthetic experience from life that we render most meaningful? Because we all know those moments are there. Those are the moments that would make Final Cut. Only in these moments we experience afresh the hardly bearable ecstasy of direct energy exploding on our nerve endings. This is the rhapsodic, ecstatic bursting forth of awe that expands our perceptual parameters beyond all previous limits, and we literally have to reconfigure our mental models of the world in order to assimilate the beauty of that download. That is what it means to be inspired. The Greek root of the term means to breathe in, to take it in. We fit the universe through our brains, and it comes out in the form of nothing less than poetry. We have a responsibility to awe.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. You all know that feeling of awe. I mean, I certainly am addicted to it, and it makes me feel closer and more connected to whoever I'm with when I have that feeling. It allows us to transcend the ego. It allows us to sort of reset our creative capacities. It's a wonderful thing, and as I said, it's therapeutic. Now, inspiration is defined by being fleeting. It's defined by its impermanence. It's very lonely. It happens in our heads, right? And then we try to use these rudimentary tools like language and painting and mathematics to somehow convey, communicate what's happening in our heads. And I think that really the inspiration behind these videos is an attempt to do that. It's an attempt to connect. It's an attempt to do what Terence McKenna says, find the others, find our commonalities, and get excited about what's possible. Now, we're calling this session MindTrip. We were thinking of calling it Mindgasm or Braingasm, and I think that the last video we're going to show today really encapsulates that idea. Now, we're a technologically advanced civilization. We're in the early stages, but we're moving very fast. I think I've communicated that to you today. And so one would wonder if there's other life forms out in space that might have evolved and followed similar evolutionary patterns. They would have had much more time to develop these technologies exponentially, and yet we find no evidence in space for these technologically advanced civilizations. You know, where are they, right? Like, people look up and they're like, it's so big, why can't we find any evidence? There's a futurist called John Smart that came up with what I think is an amazing hypothesis called the Transcending hypothesis. And it's like the most out there thing I've ever come across. I decided I had to make a video about it because it is within the realm of speculation. But just try to have an open mind, I'm sure you will. The idea being that as we expand outwards, we're also expanding inwards. So yeah, we're going to the moon and sending satellites up into space, but we're also creating denser and denser computational mind spaces, computational substrates, and that eventually, when we transcend our biological origins, when we create AI, non-biological minds that surpass us, which really they're going to be us, we won't need to live in this physical space anymore. We'll live in these virtual worlds inside of these femtoscales computational substrates. Hear me out. Watch the video. and let me see what you think. I'll leave you with one line. We may be flying, we may be stumbling primates, but when we work together, we are primates that can fly. Ladies and gentlemen, transcension. Let's roll it.
Let's talk about the transcension hypothesis, which is really a kind of intellectual aerobics exercise. It's a fascinating account coined by John Smart, the futurist, to account for Fermi's paradox. Now, Fermi's paradox is basically, look, the universe is infinitely grand, it's unfathomable in scope. There's conditions for life everywhere to have emerged. We're discovering more exoplanets all the time. Yet where is all the evidence? How come we can't find any evidence of intelligent civilizations evolving anywhere else? That is a paradox. So much bigness and no evidence of life. So John Smart says, it's actually not that complicated, because consider what happens. Technologically advanced civilizations, only in their adolescence, expand outwards. It's primitive. Oh, we're going and we're going to hunt and conquer lands. We're going to reach that moon and that planet. And he says, yeah, that's only in our technological adolescence. As civilizations become more intelligent, they start realizing that the real exploration is going in, not going out. We're creating denser and denser computational substrates. We're spending more of our mind time, more of our thinking time in virtual spaces anyway. And eventually we're going to create sentience, non-biological minds that are living inside of femtoscale densities of computing. Eventually we will actually get to black hole-like conditions where these sentient minds, which will be us, can disappear out of the visible universe, be slingshotted into the end of time, and then give a high five to every other technologically advanced civilization over there. So that is transcension. You know why we can't see evidence? Because they've literally disappeared as virtual minds into these femtoscale-like black hole dimensions and escaped this visible universe. So how's that for a dinner party chat?
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Now, I make these videos to share with the world. They're all available online on my Shots of Awe YouTube channel, as well as my Future of Us web series with AOL. So I encourage you to check them out and share them with your friends. And let's continue the conversation. I'm at Jason Silva on Twitter. Thank you so much for having me, Ken Lyons, PhD. Thank you, guys. You're awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Well, up until now, at Cannes, when you come here, you need, to worry about the top of your head getting fried. But now I think you need to know about you inside your head getting fried as well. You need like sunblock, internal sunblock.
Yes, you do. I think we do. I think we gave them a mindgasm.
I think you definitely did that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
hopefully.
One thing when I listen to you talk,
yeah,
I can't help, and I'm sure everyone else feels the same, sense a real spiritual dimension to what you're talking about.
Sure.
Is that what we're actually talking about? We talk about exponential change and the singularity. Is that what it is, do you think?
Well, there's a lot of patterns and parallels between these exciting ideas that imply that we're kind of moving in a direction towards transcending our limits. And I prefer the word transcendence to spirituality, because spirituality has been hijacked by a lot of corrupt institutions.
Yeah.
But the idea of transcendence, the idea of transcendence means the sum of the parts adds up to more than the parts.
Yeah.
Emergent behaviors, emergent phenomenons that sprout into existence in a self-organizing universe. Kevin Kelly talks about this in Out of Control. There's this auto-creation. So you put certain things together in a certain way, as Kurzweil says, and they achieve transcendent effects. Ray says our ability to create virtual models in our heads, combined with our modest-looking thumbs, was sufficient to usher in a secondary force of evolution called technology. And it will continue until the entire universe is at our fingertips. But again, this echoes a lot of the idea that Timothy Leary used to talk about, drug-addled transcendence, and then later that drug-addled transcendence being literalized by technology. So the computer became the literalization of the mind-manifesting psychedelic dream of expanding our minds and expanding our horizons. Or the Jesuit priest, Teilhard de Chardin, who talked about the omega point, and he was excommunicated by the church for seeing these patterns. But I really like the word transcendence for that reason, because I think that, it's better than spirituality.
So you mentioned Ray Kurzweil there, and for people that aren't aware of Ray Kurzweil, he's the, Time Magazine referred to him as the natural heir to Edison.
100%.
He's now head of engineering at Google.
Yeah.
And he has the unlimited resources of Google at his disposal.
Right.
In a sense, he's the person who's manifesting your ideas that you propound more than anyone. Tell me, what is he doing? So coming back now more to sort of the near future.
Absolutely.
What's he doing?
Ray is a huge inspiration for me. When I first came across his book, The Singularity is Near, I became obsessed. I did a short film when I was working for Al Gore's Current TV called The Immortalists, where I interviewed Ray and we became good friends. And I told him at the time, my goal is to help get these ideas out into the world. And so I helped his film Transcending Man, and we're good friends at this point. And one of the things that he talks about is he just kind of builds on Moore's law. So he starts with these data-driven facts that show the acceleration of technology, the exponential leaps we've made, and then he just makes extrapolations that follow those same patterns. And he is called the heir to Thomas Edison. And the thing is, everything that he says is backed up by like sound, rational arguments, but it's still so counterintuitive to us to contemplate how the half-a billion-sized supercomputer shrank to the phone in your pocket. That is it just boggles the mind. So I recommend people check out The Singularity is Near. And I think that what he's doing with Google is very exciting. Not to mention Google founder Larry Page started Calico, California Life Extension Company. So imagine biotechnologies and information technologies joining forces, arresting the aging process, redefining what a lifespan is. All these exciting things are coming on the horizon, I think.
So we just need some sunblock to be invented for the inside of the head.
Yeah, some sunblock would be good.
Thank you very much.
Man. Thank you, man.
Fantastic.
Thank you for having me. All right, brother.